It was supposed to be just another weekend shift. The city marathon drew thousands every year, and although the route was mostly safe, a medical tent and a small forensics crew stayed on standby just in case. I was halfway through my coffee when the radio call came. Unresponsive male, possible cardiac arrest, route sector 3. I arrived 6 minutes later. The man lay on the ground, surrounded by volunteers and runners trying to help. CPR was being administered, but I could tell it was too late. His skin was pale, lips slightly blue. 42 years old, in peak physical condition. No external injuries, no signs of trauma. His bib number was 1167. Name, Marcos Vale, a well-known amateur athlete in the community. Everyone said the same thing. He just collapsed. No warning. One moment he was running. The next he was on the ground. It looked like a textbook heart attack, but it wasn't. Here's the thing. In my line of work, instincts matter. And my instincts didn't buy the story. I've seen heart attacks before. I've seen dozens of runners collapse from dehydration or exhaustion. But Marcos didn't have the look of someone who had pushed his body to the limit. His muscles weren't stiff. His pupils weren't dilated. And something else, his smartwatch, still working, still recording. Out of habit, I synced the data to a field laptop. Distance covered, 17.4 kilometers. Time, 1 hour, 15 minutes. Average pace, consistent, but right at the 14.2 kilometers mark. The data showed something odd. An 11-minute pause. No heart rate, no movement, as if the device had been taken off or he had stopped completely. Why would an experienced runner stop for 11 minutes in the middle of a marathon? I replayed the GPS map. That exact point was a stretch of road with no cameras, no volunteers. A blind spot. When I zoomed into the GPS pattern, another detail jumped out. The movement during those 11 minutes wasn't stationary. It showed a jittery back and forth, like someone pacing or struggling. I reported my doubts. The body was taken in for a full autopsy. Cause of death, cyanide poisoning. Fast-acting, untraceable in casual screening, and lethal in small doses. Now it was murder. But by who and how? I started interviewing the people who ran nearby him. One woman remembered he briefly left the road to tie his shoelace near some portable toilets. Another said she saw him talking to someone. Couldn't remember who. When I asked if anyone had seen him drink anything unusual, only one person had a clear memory. He had one of those little squeeze bottles, she said. Clear liquid. I remember because he dropped it right before collapsing. That bottle was nowhere to be found at the scene. But then a break came. A drone video taken by a local running club used to document the race for social media. It wasn't very clear, but when I enhanced the frame at the 14.2 kilometers mark, I saw something. Marcos wasn't alone. Another man, wearing almost identical clothes, was standing next to him. Same build, same cap, but there was a moment, maybe 1 second, where the two swapped something between them, and that's when it clicked. It was a switch. Marcos was given a bottle, not his own. I traced the footage back to just before and just after that point, and that's when the most chilling part revealed itself. The other man disappeared. Completely. He stopped running. He never crossed the finish line. He wasn't registered. He was never part of the race. That's when the theory formed in my mind. A perfect setup. Marcos was poisoned during the race by someone posing as a fellow runner. No cameras, no bib, just a costume to blend in. The bottle was poisoned. The switch was done in seconds. Marcos probably didn't feel the effect immediately. Cyanide can take a few minutes to hit. By the time he collapsed, the killer was long gone. But why kill Marcos? I dug deeper into his life. Clean background, no enemies, no financial problems. But then I found something. A court case from 3 years ago. Marcos had been a witness in a federal trial involving embezzlement at a pharmaceutical company. His testimony had helped convict a senior executive. The same executive who had just been released from prison 2 months earlier on a technicality. I requested airport records, cross-referenced with cell tower data, and finally, a hotel check-in under a fake name 2 blocks from the race start. A man matching the general description of the fake runner. He checked out the morning after the race. Gone. The murder wasn't personal. It was business. A message. A clean hit. Masked as natural death in a public space with minimal evidence. If it weren't for the GPS glitch, I might have signed it off as heart failure. The case never made it to trial. There was no concrete evidence to link the ex-executive to the man in the race. No fingerprints, no bottle, no name. But the message was received. And Marcos? He ran his last race blind to the target painted on his back. Even after all these years, that case still bothers me. Because sometimes justice doesn't come with a badge or a courtroom. Sometimes it's just silence. And if I hadn't looked closer, that silence would have buried the truth. In this job, it's not about what's obvious. It's about what's missing. It started with a call on a Wednesday morning. Abandoned vehicle. Possible foul odor. Location, KM9 highway shoulder. Those are the kinds of calls you never ignore, especially when the word odor is mentioned. When I got to the scene, the sun was already beating down on the black sedan, which looked like it had been parked there for days. The tires were partially flat. No sign of recent activity. The car was locked, but it only took breaking the rear window to confirm. There was a body in the trunk. But that wasn't all. What caught my attention right away wasn't the body itself, already in an advanced state of decomposition, but an item left on the back seat, a half-empty plastic bottle of mineral water, its label partially torn off. It seemed out of place. In a scene that had been so carefully cleaned, that detail didn't belong. That was the first mental trigger. Something wasn't right. The body belonged to Mauricio Canto, 38, an accountant. No criminal record. Married for 7 years to Veronica, a schoolteacher. No witnesses saw when the car was left there. His documents were still in the glove box. His phone was missing. Cause of death, blunt force trauma to the head. Likely a pipe, maybe used in his own garage. The first suspect, of course, was a wife. They lived together, and she was the one who reported him missing 2 days earlier. Said he left for work and never returned. But Veronica had a solid alibi, security footage from her workplace, and call logs to her husband's number on the same day he disappeared. So far, it looked like a crime with no clear suspect. But that bottle on the back seat was like a splinter under the skin. It wouldn't let go. I had it sent for testing. Fingerprints, DNA from the bottle cap, and something almost missed. The label wasn't from a major distributor, but from a local water bottling company in an industrial neighborhood. A brand sold only at a tiny corner store across town. Why would Mauricio have a bottle from a place he never went to? I went to the store, showed them the image of the bottle. The owner recognized it immediately. That's mine. I sell those every day. I asked if he remembered who bought it recently. He didn't, but he had cameras. And there she was. 2 days before the disappearance, Veronica was on camera buying 2 of those bottles. Trigger. Doubt turned into certainty. Back at the station, I requested access to her phone records. Messages were frequently deleted, but we recovered part of a backup. Conversations with a man named Bruno. At first, they seemed casual, until things turned intimate. But the most incriminating part was a message, deleted minutes after being sent. He's leaving tonight. Tomorrow will finally be free. I cross-checked the time. That message was sent 1 hour before Mauricio went missing. We placed Veronica under discreet surveillance and called her back in for questioning. She stayed calm, but her mistake was subtle. A linguistic slip. When I asked if she and her husband used to travel at night, she said, no, he didn't like driving at night. But the body had been dumped in the middle of the night, and her last call to him was made at 2:11 a.m. She knew about the night drive, even though she said he disappeared in the morning. When confronted with the store footage and recovered messages, Veronica broke. She confessed, but tried to justify it as a moment of rage after discovering a supposed affair, something we were never able to confirm. She said she used a metal pipe during an argument in the garage. Bruno, Her lover helped load the body into the car. She drove it to the roadside herself. What she didn't know, and what ultimately sealed their fate, was that forgotten water bottle. Bruno had taken a sip while they waited in the car. His fingerprint was on the cap. DNA on the bottle's mouth confirmed it. Their plan to clean everything up failed because of one simple human mistake: thirst. It's amazing how, in crimes of passion, emotion always betrays reason. They cleaned the car, deleted messages, built alibis, but they didn't think about the bottle. Didn't think that something so small could destroy the whole plan. An amateur criminal's mind doesn't account for details, but details are everything. Veronica was sentenced to 23 years. Bruno got 18. Neither showed remorse in court. They only said they wanted to live in peace. But peace doesn't come from murder. And it was the smallest thing in the scene that spoke for Mauricio: a forgotten bottle. In the end, as I always say, sometimes what solves the case isn't what's there. It's what's out of place. It was a burglary case. At least, that's how it started. An old man, Arturo Reese, 72 years old, found dead in his home. No signs of forced entry. No signs of struggle. The only thing that stood out was that the small safe in his office, the kind bolted to the floor, was slightly open, almost as if it had been left like that on purpose. But when I looked inside, it was completely empty. Now, here's where my instincts kicked in. You see, people like Arturo, retired bankers, lifelong bachelors, creatures of habit. They don't leave safes empty, not unless they're expecting trouble, or unless someone else emptied it for them. But then, why leave the door open? The scene was cold, almost surgical. No broken glass, no ransacked drawers. Arturo was found in his reading chair, in front of a cold cup of tea. No wounds, no bruises. Nothing visible. Toxicology would later reveal a high dose of digitalis, a substance found in some heart medications. And in the wrong hands, a perfect silent killer. It was mixed in the tea. The thing is, Arturo didn't have a heart condition. Trigger one. How did a man with no prescription access that drug? Neighbors said he lived alone, no recent visitors, no family. But a background check revealed one interesting detail. He had recently updated his will, leaving everything, his house, his assets, to a woman named Layla, 29 years old, former caregiver. They hadn't been in contact for 6 months. 6 months. That's a lot of time to suddenly become someone's sole heir. I tracked her down. Layla had no criminal record, very polished speech, and a calm, overly composed demeanor that didn't sit right with me. She claimed Arturo was like a father to her, that they had a falling out, but he had always promised to take care of her. She seemed genuinely hurt, until I asked about the safe. She froze, not visibly, but enough for me to notice the micro-expression, a slight tightening around the eyes, a pause that was just 1 second too long. She said she didn't know he had a safe. That was all I needed to hear. Trigger 2, no one forgets a safe, especially if they once lived in that house. I started digging deeper into the safe itself. Manufacturer's number, model, maintenance logs. And that's when I found something unusual. The safe had never been opened. Not once. Not in the last 6 years. The model kept digital logs of every unlock. The log was clean. 0 access events. Let me repeat that. The safe wasn't just empty. It had never been opened at all. Not even by Arturo. Now the questions piled up. If Arturo didn't open the safe, what was supposed to be inside? Why was it installed in the first place? And why pretend it had been robbed? This is where things got strange. An old colleague of Arturo's, a former branch manager, agreed to speak to me off the record. He told me that Arturo had always been paranoid about what he called posthumous insurance. Not financial insurance. No leverage. According to him, Arturo kept copies of confidential records from high-level clients, documents that could ruin reputations. He used them as a safety net in case anything ever happened to him, the kind of thing that could make dangerous enemies. So I asked the obvious, where were those documents now? That's when the real picture began to emerge. Arturo had ordered the safe as a decoy. The real storage was a hidden compartment behind a fake panel in the wall of his basement wine cellar. One that wasn't even listed in the original blueprints of the house. We got a warrant, opened it. Inside, we found a stack of folders, a sealed envelope, and a flash drive. The folders contained names, account numbers, blackmail records, and forged signatures, enough to implicate several powerful people in financial fraud, laundering, and even bribes. But what stood out the most was a letter, addressed to Layla. It said, "If you're reading this, you failed the test. I wanted to believe you were loyal, that the months we spent talking meant something, but I couldn't take the risk. What's hidden here will speak louder than I ever could." He knew she'd come for it. He knew she'd poison him. He left the safe open on purpose, empty, so she'd think she had gotten away with it. And he left behind just enough for someone like me to notice that something wasn't right. Psychological warfare at its finest. He baited her, and she walked right into the trap. Layla was arrested the same week. She denied everything, of course, but the poison traces on her gloves and her DNA on the teacup sealed her fate. The digitalis came from a fake prescription under a false name, tied back to a pharmacy where a camera caught her picking it up. She thought she was being clever, but Arturo had written his final chapter long before she ever lifted that cup. The safe was never meant to protect secrets. It was meant to expose them. And in the end, that's exactly what it did. I was called to the scene on a rainy Tuesday morning. A small, quiet neighborhood, the kind where everyone waves and no one locks their doors until something goes wrong. Luis Paredes, 46, found dead in his home office, shot once in the chest. The room was in perfect order, no signs of struggle, nothing stolen. Door locked from the inside. The window slightly open, but no footprints in the garden. The whole thing screamed suicide. Except it wasn't. From the moment I walked in, something felt artificial. Not the death, that was very real, but the way it was presented. A gun neatly placed on the floor, a chair perfectly centered behind the desk, no blood on his hands. Trigger one. When people stage a scene, they tend to overcorrect. Luis worked from home as a tax consultant. Divorced, no kids, no known enemies. A lonely man at first glance. But the neighbor said something that stuck with me. He used to print all kinds of things. At night, sometimes you'd hear the machine going for hours. Then, about a week ago, silence. It seemed irrelevant until I opened the hallway closet. Tucked behind a few coats and an old vacuum cleaner was a large, high-end laser printer, still warm. That was odd, because it hadn't printed anything since the night before. The tray had only one sheet in it. But what it showed made the hairs on my neck stand up. A fake bank statement, professionally made, multiple names, hidden accounts, the kind of thing that doesn't just appear by accident. And at the bottom, something stranger still, a single name underlined in red, Beatriz. I didn't know who she was. Yet, I took the printer and the hard drive from his computer in for analysis. In the meantime, I spoke with his ex-wife. She hadn't seen him in over a year, but mentioned something curious. A former client of his had sued him a few months earlier, claiming Luis had helped launder money. The case was dropped. Lack of evidence. But maybe Luis had kept records. Maybe someone didn't want them found. We dug deeper. His computer was clean, too clean. All recent files had been wiped, but the printer's internal memory? Still intact. It had logged over 300 documents in the past 2 months, mostly spreadsheets, PDF forms, and identity templates. Trigger 2. Tax consultants don't typically print fake IDs. One document stood out, a fake death certificate, issued under the name Beatriz Ramalho. Cross-referencing public records, I found the real Beatriz, 38, secretary, reported missing 3 weeks earlier, never found. Her name had been on that bank statement. One of the hidden accounts was in her name. It hit me. Luis was part of something bigger. And Beatrice might have been a loose end. I checked with financial crimes. They confirmed Beatrice had unknowingly signed off on several shell companies. Luis was likely the one who set them up, using his position to forge documents and route money. But somewhere along the line, he had a change of heart or got scared. The printer in the closet wasn't just storage. It was his black box. He'd been printing the whole web, tracing the money, the players, the fake names, and someone found out that someone was probably the one who killed him, staged it as suicide, and thought wiping the computer would be enough. But they didn't know about the printer. They didn't hear it whirring at night. Or maybe they heard it too late. We enhanced the fingerprints on the printer panel. Several matched Luis. One set didn't. They belonged to Marcelo Antunes, the same man who sued Luis months earlier, a construction businessman. His company had already been flagged for irregular contracts. Marcelo denied knowing Luis personally. That lie didn't hold long. We subpoenaed Marcelo's financials. One of the shell companies traced from Luis's printer connected directly to a dummy account Marcelo accessed weekly. Game over. He cracked under pressure. Admitted he confronted Luis. Pressured him to destroy the evidence. Luis refused. Said he was ready to go to the authorities. Marcelo shot him. Staged the room, wiped the drive. But he forgot the closet. He forgot the printer. He forgot that men like Luis, when afraid, hide the truth in the places no one thinks to look. The machine had kept the secrets he couldn't say out loud. In the end, the irony was brutal. The one thing Marcelo overlooked wasn't a computer, a witness, or a camera. It was a piece of office equipment. A printer hidden in a hallway closet. But it told us everything. And it reminded me of something I've seen over and over my years on the job. The smallest detail can unravel the most carefully constructed lie. Sometimes, the smallest piece of paper can tell the biggest story. It was a Sunday afternoon when I got the call. A house fire in a quiet residential block. Minimal damage, quickly contained, but a man was found dead inside. They suspected he'd passed out from smoke inhalation, but when I arrived, I knew it was more than that. The victim was Elias Noguera, 54, divorced, worked from home as an accountant, a normal guy on paper. The fire had started in the living room, close to the fireplace, but a fireman said it looked intentional. Accelerants had been used, cheap ones like cooking oil, sloppy, but enough to confuse the origin point. The odd part, the body was in the kitchen, far from the fire source. He had collapsed with his hand outstretched, as if he was trying to reach something. His face was turned toward the back door. It was unlocked. He could have escaped, but he didn't. That's when I noticed it, the first of several small, almost invisible clues. Near the fireplace, among the charred debris, there was something strange. The half-burned corner of a handwritten note, stuck between two logs that hadn't fully caught fire. Most people wouldn't have looked twice, but my eyes were trained to look for silence, for the thing that doesn't belong. I used tweezers and patience. The note was delicate, crisp with fire damage, but enough survived to read a few words. Not safe anymore. They found O. Tell the police Abu. Never trusted car. That was all. 3 fragmented lines. A warning. A name almost complete. Car. My gut twisted. Someone had tried to warn someone else, and they burned the message before it could be read. Trigger 1. People don't burn notes unless what's written can ruin them. We ran handwriting analysis. It didn't match Elias. This wasn't his handwriting. Someone had either written it for him, or he had intercepted it. That changed everything. The autopsy showed traces of sleeping medication in his bloodstream, enough to impair, not kill, but it explained why he didn't escape. He didn't pass out from smoke. He was already woozy before the fire started. Murder, staged as an accident. His home office had been untouched by fire, so we started searching. Behind a drawer in his desk, I found a flash drive taped underneath. Password protected. Took us a day to break in. Inside were scanned receipts, offshore banking logs, and copies of tax records, all linked to multiple names, all aliases. But one file had a real name, Carlos Ramirez, a business associate Elias had worked with 2 years ago before their company dissolved. The same car from the burn message? Carlos had since gone private, running a series of consulting firms that didn't seem to consult anyone. We looked into one of his businesses. It was listed in an old shell company scandal, but was never formally accused. Here's where it got darker. Elias had recently emailed an investigative journalist, anonymously, with encrypted files. We traced the email. He used a VPN, but one line of metadata slipped through. It matched a timestamp when Elias was logged in from his home Wi-Fi. He was the whistleblower. The files showed money laundering, tax fraud, and false declarations, all traceable to Carlos and 3 other names. Elias had cracked the operation from the inside, but he hesitated. The message in the fire was from someone warning him, maybe another insider, or maybe someone trying to save him. He was going to go to the police. That much was clear, and someone silenced him before he could. Trigger 2. Silence usually comes fast when truth gets too close. We brought Carlos in. Arrogant, cold. Said he hadn't spoken to Elias in years. Claimed ignorance about any offshore accounts. I handed him a copy of the burn note. Replicated, of course. When he read it, his face twitched. Not panic, not fear, anger, like something had slipped past his control. He asked if we'd found anything else. We hadn't told him where the note was found, or that the flash drive existed. Classic mistake. We searched his house, his cars, his properties. In one of his vacation cabins, hidden behind insulation in the wall, we found more documents. Some original versions of what was on the flash drive. Elias wasn't just duplicating records. He was collecting insurance. Evidence. Enough to bring down an entire operation. Carlos was arrested. He's facing trial for arson, obstruction, conspiracy, and murder. And yet, I still think about the message. It was short, unfinished, probably written in haste. Maybe someone tried to protect Elias. Maybe they failed. But it was enough. Half a page. 3 lines. 1 name. That's all it took to unravel the lie. And every time I think of the scene, the blackened fireplace, the note half swallowed by flame, I remember why I do this. Because sometimes justice starts with what someone else tried to destroy.